All right, welcome Unsecurity Podcast listeners. Welcome to episode 170. It's just me on this episode. Brad's on a much needed and well deserved vacation this week, so it's just me. This is all you get. But I do have some topics to talk about that our marketing team has given us, and I think we'll pick up the discussion in episode 171. So stick with me. This will be a shorter episode, but I think hopefully you'll get some value out of it. So the topics they gave me are first K-12. Now that people are back in school, how things have changed. We'll talk about the timeline briefly, how things looked before COVID, and now that we're back in person, what changed. I've got some news articles that we'll talk about briefly. One is what is a zero-click attack? I think it's kind of important. And some people are a little scared about zero clicks. You don't have to be, really. I think if you're not a high-profile target, you haven't made enemies, you might be okay. But there are some protections we can take to make it a little less likely and a little less impactful, those zero-click attacks. Then we'll talk about MailChimp. MailChimp was breached in the last couple of weeks. That was interesting. Talk about Brokenwire. Brokenwire is an attack against charging stations, vehicle charging stations. And then we'll wrap up with a discussion briefly about the Borat rat malware that was recently released. So first, K-12. I was going to invite my favorite K-12 cybersecurity or information security expert, Ryan Cloutier, to this episode with me, but I've given him way too much work to do already, so we're going to give him a break as well. That's why you just get me. We've all been super, super busy. Ryan's traveling over the country doing all his stuff. Brad is, like I said, on a much-needed vacation. I just got back from Mexico a couple days ago. We had the FRSecure executive leadership team retreat where we discussed what our future plans are and all that other good stuff. On another front, the CVCISO, so Certified Virtual Chief Information Security Officer, the first class is almost done. I've taught 28 lessons so far for that certification. 2 lessons left to go. So we'll wrap that up this week. I'm excited about that. The first go at just about everything. It's not up to snuff for me anyway, and I think the students are okay with it, but I think we have a lot better we can do in the next iteration, and I'm excited about that. But we're getting through it. That was 3 classes a night, creating content as we go. Pretty time intensive and tiring, really. The CISSP Mentor Program, I'm excited about that. That's starting next week. So April 11th, there's still time for you to get registered. It's free, 100% free. If you don't know the history of the CISSP Mentor Program, we started that thing in 2010 with 6 students. Last year we had 6,418 registrations. That's the official number, I'm told. And now I think this year we're well over that number, maybe over 7,000. I'm also excited because a couple of my friends, really, really good cybersecurity people, information security people, are joining us. So we've added 2 more instructors. We've added good friend Ron Warner. If you don't know Ron's been around for a while. Adjunct professor somewhere, I can't remember exactly where. Spoken at the FRSA conference, I think 8 times, he said. So, he's been around and knows some things. I'm excited about him joining. And then, who else? Christophe Foulon. Christophe Foulon recently published his first book. He's also been a speaker at RSA, which is pretty cool. And I think people get a lot of value out of that. And then the regulars, I'll be there for the first session to kick things off, and then I'll play a supporting role, kind of stay in the background a little bit. Ryan Cloutier will also be an instructor, as will Brad Nye. So we have 4 instructors. That'll be sort of nice, mix things up as we go. So that starts again April 11th. If you don't know, or if you haven't signed up, or you know somebody who might be interested, go to FRSecure.com. And under resources, you'll see the CISSP Mentor program, and you can go ahead and sign up. Like I said, really, really busy. So that's life as an information security person. I think it's sort of always been this way. Things to talk about. Okay, so we've got the K-12, and talking about K-12, man, it my heart goes out to underserved markets, and K-12 is certainly one of those. So how things looked before COVID, it's not like they were super secure before COVID, but I think things were a lot simpler. Now, if you know the mantra I say, well, one of the pieces of wisdom I share all the time is complexity is the worst enemy of cybersecurity. And pre-COVID, things were simpler. So it was easier to secure. It doesn't necessarily mean it was more secure. But when you think about it this way, remote learning it was around, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. There wasn't as much chaos involved. Things weren't nearly as political, it didn't seem. And so as a typical K-12 tech director or somebody who's in charge of information security in most school districts. Now, I'm not talking the really large school districts, which really run almost like businesses. They've got pretty good resources. They, doing pretty well. But most of the others, right? So take anything below maybe the top 50 largest school districts in the country. They often don't have full-time information security or cybersecurity staff. They may have some full-time IT staff. Oftentimes, somebody's been nominated to be the tech director, so it's not uncommon in smaller school districts for a teacher or a sports coach or something has a dual role, and also as a tech director and supports the schools with the technology and what have you. So that's one thing. I think in K-12, it's rare to find really solid, seasoned information security and cybersecurity experts. So you started there. Things were simpler. You may have had, a few networks that you were responsible for securing. You may or may not have had students bringing their own computers into the school or taking them home. Probably didn't have to provide remote access or a lot of remote learning opportunities pre-COVID. So, it was still overwhelming, maybe for a lot of these tech directors and folks in K-12. They also weren't, from our perspective, from our industry, we weren't really focusing too much on them. To be honest, there wasn't much money there, so it didn't make sense for the biggest money makers in our industry to focus a lot of time and effort on K-12. So that was what it was like before COVID, just off the top of my head. Then COVID hit, schools shut down. We needed to, not shut down, but physically shut down, and we needed to hurry up and get a whole bunch of iPads, MacBooks, Chromebooks, whatever we're using. We had to get a whole bunch of them to students and get them connected, get them online and what have you. So it was a simpler environment. Now, say I maybe had 5, 6 networks that I needed to concern myself about. Now I've got maybe a few hundred, a few thousand, maybe networks. When you think about how things exploded into the homes, and I needed to I needed to configure things quickly. I needed to configure them correctly, securely, provide training at the same time. And at the same time dealing with all the political fallout and, the people that are supporting K-12, teachers, administrators, they have families too. So they're also concerned about the security and safety of their own families. So you mix all this together, and it's no wonder, and the fact that they weren't served well, it's no wonder that K-12, in terms of information security and cybersecurity was really, really a mess. Now, as things have progressed, and people are getting back to school, I think the dust is settling a little bit, but it's still chaos. The sad thing, sort of, now is there is money, more money than there was before to secure things, but not often enough are we seeing them secure the fundamentals about information security. So a lot more buying blinky lights. The money grabbers in our industry, don't really, I think many times don't care that they're selling products that people can't use or don't know how to use or don't need. So we really need to get out in front of this a little bit more and ensure that K-12 is spending the next information security dollar on the thing they should be spending that next security dollar on, which would be basics. It would be fundamentals. It would be, asset management. It would be network segmentation and isolation. It'd be, managing your firewall appropriately, ingress and egress. It'd be roles and responsibilities, governance. I mean, not the sexy parts of information security, but the essential parts, where if you just skip those things and decide to put in a bunch of blinky light stuff, it's going to have much less of an impact, or could have a negative impact on the current state of security, because now you've got a false sense of security and you're sort of building things on top of a faulty foundation. So K-12 is, I think things have settled a little bit. I think now there's a little more time and attention to devote to cybersecurity and information security. What we really need to focus on, though, are those basics and fundamentals. And we can parlay that into instruction, into teaching students, what it means to be responsible with technology. We find ourselves in a really bad spot as a society, I think, because we've adopted new technology faster than our ability to use it responsibly. And if more people were using technology responsibly, we'd have a lot less of a mess to deal with. So there's a central theme there, that the fundamentals and basics that we need to focus on in K-12 to protect the school, to protect the school district, to protect the community, we can parlay that into teaching students what it means to be responsible with technology, how to use it responsibly. Things like, not installing a whole bunch of applications. I mean, something as simple as not installing a whole bunch of applications on your phone that you don't know how to use, that you don't know how to secure. Take the time to learn those things first. So that's about all I have for K-12. And we might pick this back up again when Brad gets back next week and talk more about it. I could preach about this for a while, and I think that's probably enough for now. Get out there, teach them the basics, teach them the fundamentals. Information security at the end of the day is always risk management, not risk elimination. So understanding that I won't be able to prevent all bad things from happening. Therefore, I should have things in place to detect those bad things. And when I detect them, I certainly hope I have a response, a good response. So an incident response plan and program is one of those fundamentals too. So that's that. I've got just a few news things to cover. The first is it's from PC Magazine, and I think it's sort of interesting. It's cool. It's nice to see that it's being brought out, I think, more in the mainstream now, because these are attacks that have been around for a while, and we should talk about these. So the first is, and the title is, "What is a zero-click attack?" It's pretty self-explanatory from a user perspective what a zero-click attack is. It's an attack that takes advantage of a vulnerability in an application, typically a messaging application, like maybe your mail application, your messaging applications. And as soon as you just view them, or the application itself processes that message, that communication, you're infected. So it doesn't require the user to click anything. It doesn't require them to do anything. Really, just having the application on their system and receiving that message from an attacker is enough to compromise the system. So we focus a lot on social engineering types of attacks like phishing and smishing, but here it's not a social engineering attack. It's just an attack. Just having, like I said, just having the application. These zero-click attacks shouldn't be confused with zero-day attacks. A zero-day attack is different. A zero-day attack is an attack that there's no remediation for it yet. We don't know how to protect ourselves potentially from it. There's no workaround and there's no patch. That's what a zero-day attack is. A zero-click attack is, like I said, just no click, you're attacked. Now, one of the organizations you may have heard of over time was NSO Software. It's an Israeli firm, and they make software and other things to protect, and they sell it. They sell, attack software, surveillance software, other things, similar to that, to nation states, so to the United States, to Britain, to whoever, that they can then use to try to seek out criminals, bad people, monitor their communications, hack their systems so that we can bring them to justice or protect ourselves. One of those pieces of software was called Pegasus software, which sort of emerged back in 2000. We learned about it in 2018, so 4 years ago. It was a zero-click piece of software, so you could infect a system without any user interaction whatsoever. Google also published a paper, a technical analysis of this type of exploit in their Project Zero attack. So the way it works is, like I said, just having an infected application, or I'm sorry, a flawed application. Sometimes it's patched, sometimes it's not patched. It could be an unpatched application, or it could be an application for which there is no patch yet. Right? The manufacturer might not even know that it's vulnerable to a zero-click attack. So it's receive the messaging or receive the communication in some way that exploit is launched just by your application processing that message. And it might be something like a PDF, it might be a hidden image, it might be something as simple as a text message. So there's not much you can do as a user in protecting yourself from the actual attack, and you probably wouldn't notice the attack. There are ways you could, but you have to get a little more technical, a little more detailed with it. So on the prevention side of things, the best prevention or the best practices that we've been preaching for a long time: keep your applications updated, because as the manufacturers of these applications become aware of these things, they'll typically release a patch. And so keeping your software up to date is important. Using good other hygiene type things like, long, strong passwords, multi-factor authentication if you can. Not reusing passwords. All those things are good protections. They won't stop a zero-click attack. There really isn't any one thing that will stop a zero-click attack. If you can run an anti-malware, do that as well. That's not going to be a silver bullet either. Really, the only silver bullet here is to not use applications, right? And that's kind of defeats the purpose of for many of us using our phones. One of the things you talk about irresponsible or adopting technology faster than our ability to use it responsibly. One of the things I preach is, how many applications do you even have on your phone? Most people don't know. Now I'm an iPhone user, so I would go to settings, and then I would go to general, and if you scroll down a little bit, and then about, and then scroll down a little bit, you'll find how many applications you have installed on your phone. You have the number of songs, videos, photos, applications, capacity, and all that other good stuff. I suggest you look at that. Most people don't know. So on a typical phone, 70, 80, 100, a couple hundred applications maybe on an iPhone. Some of those applications you don't need. Some of those applications you don't use. I would say applications you don't use even on a weekly basis or sometimes even a daily basis, delete them. You can reinstall them really easily with any network connectivity And because I know one of the things I struggle with myself is, do I want to delete this? I might use it again sometime. That's fine. It doesn't cost you anything to download that application later. So, get rid of it. That's one less thing that can be exploited from a zero-click attack. That would be one thing. Another thing is to pay attention. So from a prevention standpoint, really it's good hygiene stuff. Don't run the application itself if you can help it. So only run applications you need. Now the other thing is I did all that and I'm still concerned that maybe something's funky with my phone. Pay attention. Situational awareness is really important. If your phone operates slower than it did before, if you notice that it does things that it didn't do before, it freezes or it reboots or things like that, that's an indication that something might be wrong. Computers only do, and your phone is a computer. Computers only do what they're told to do. So if it is running slower, something is telling it to run slower. If it closed the application, something told it to close the application, or it crashed. But either way, there's a reason for it. We don't want to just blow it off like it doesn't matter. So one application that I run on my phone that I actually like, it's an application called Usage. If you go to, let's see, about, it's an application, it's called Usage. It allows me to monitor all the different subsystems of a phone, the subsystems being storage, memory, processor, and network. So in a zero-click attack, the attacker will probably maintain some sort of command and control, which means they're going to be communicating with your phone, or your phone is going to be communicating with them, either inbound or outbound, and monitoring those network connections to see, well, who is my phone communicating with. Now, if you're running a whole bunch of applications, it's going to be a lot harder to monitor all those network connections. But that's why we want to reduce that footprint. So reduce the number of applications that are running on your phone and run something to monitor those connections. It's prudent and that's responsible. I realize that most people won't do that, but that's on you. Then you kind of have to weigh that against your concern of a zero-click attack as well. We can't do everything. So zero-click attacks, they're real. They will become more and more common because we run more and more applications, and it's effective. The return on investment for the attacker is there and it's significant. So enough about that. Zero-click attacks, they're real. Do some research if you're concerned. Another one is from Security Affairs. This is the MailChimp. So MailChimp. If you don't know what MailChimp is, it's a service where you can create mailing lists, newsletters, things like that, communications usually with your customers. You can upload who you're going to be sending messages to and send regular communications to them. So MailChimp has been around for a while, kind of the leader here. So threat actors, according to Security Affairs. So Security Affairs, the title of the article is MailChimp Breached. Intruders conducted phishing attacks against crypto customers, going after money. So crypto, financial institutions, those are common places to get money, obviously. So threat actors gained access to internal tools of MailChimp and conducted then phishing attacks from MailChimp as MailChimp to crypto customers. So crypto customers meaning customers who have cryptocurrency, who keep that cryptocurrency in their crypto wallet. That would be the target, the wallet. Go after the wallet, you get access to the wallet, you can take the money, and there's no recovery. So the person who lost their money through one of these attacks, it's gone, which is the sad part because that's why we're here, is to try to protect people from that stuff happening. So in this case, Trezor is one of the crypto organizations. Trezor was the target that sort of their customers were the targets that sort of alerted, like, hey, something's weird here. So essentially what happened is it's an insider attack, we think, potentially. But the attack resulted in compromised employee credentials And with those employee credentials, the tools for support were able to be used to then launch these attacks. 319 MailChimp accounts were compromised, and they managed to export something called audience data from 102 customer accounts. The attackers also gained access to API keys, application programming interface keys, to an undisclosed number of customers. And then the company, once MailChimp figured this out, they disabled those. So the attack allegedly took place they discovered the breach on March 26th, and the announcement came just a few days ago. So I don't know how long that attack was actually active. We call it dwell time. I don't know what the dwell time here was, but the company allegedly has already notified all the impacted customers. But it's just important to point out that MailChimp's are big. They've been around for a long time, and they're the ones who got hit. Another attack, which I think is interesting, but it's not really all that impactful, is an attack called Brokenwire. So Brokenwire is researchers from the University of Oxford and a name I can't pronounce, Arma Suisse, maybe? Arma Suisse. They did some research against the combined charging system, so CCS. The combined charging system is a DC, direct current, rapid charging system. So cars and trucks and things would pull into one of these charging stations and connect up their vehicle and charge. So that uses some specific standards. The standards DIN 70121, if you're interested, and ISO 15118. Those are the standards that are used. And in this particular attack, proof of concept attack, it wasn't in the wild. These are researchers from these universities. They were able to disrupt the charging system remotely. So essentially stop systems from charging, which, okay, it's interesting. And you had to be in relatively close proximity. So 47 meters was the distance. So an attacker within 47 meters could disrupt the charging station and prevent cars from being recharged, is essentially what it is. And you get a message on the charging station itself that says, unable to start the charging session, please disconnect your vehicle and start again. CCS vehicle requested stop or vehicle pilot signal error, service code 23. So it's not going to go undetected either. And they gave the name Brokenwire. They released a video proof of concept of how the attack works. It's interesting, but I don't think it's going to be terribly impactful because, one, the attacker has to be in close proximity, and two, it just disrupts charging. It doesn't compromise the car or the vehicle. It also doesn't work on attacks at home. This is on a DC charging station with following these standards. Most home chargers are alternating current, so they're AC charging stations using different communication standards. In this case, usually IEC 61851, which isn't affected by this attack. So in the future, potentially, but I would assume that manufacturers would fix this by then. So kudos to the researchers for disclosing it, because I think we can make things more secure in the future. So good stuff. Can Brokenwire break into your car? The answer to that is no, unlikely. There's no evidence of any damage done to vehicles through this attack. It's just you can't charge anymore. That's what happens. Last one I'm going to talk about briefly is this. It's a newer Trojan. It's a remote access Trojan. So RAT, if you've heard RAT before, RAT malware. RAT stands for Remote Access Trojan. And this one comes from ZDNet, and there's a new piece of malware. There's malware, maybe thousands, 30,000 strains of new malware released every day. So this is another one, but it's interesting. It's called Borat, the Borat rat malware, and it's a triple. They call it a triple threat, meaning it's not just um, remote access. So RAPs, remote access Trojans, not only remote access, it also has a spyware component and a ransomware component. And it's interesting. It's crazy how just sophisticated these things become, and the organizations behind it. So this is remote access. This is software that's you can go buy. There's a market for it. You can go online, buy it. You'll get customer support, customer service from the developers of the Borat rat. That's the name given by the researchers, by the way. It's not the name given by the actual maker of rat or Borat rat. But essentially, you can go and purchase this, and you can run this. This is malware as a service, and you can do all kinds of interesting things with it. You can do distributed denial of service attacks. If you want to disrupt, it's got keyloggers or keylogger, ransomware encryption, decryption. So if somebody pays you the ransom, you can then decrypt it. It's pretty sophisticated. You've got remote control, like I said, hidden desktop, hidden browser, hidden, all kinds of different browsers if you want. You can turn off the monitor on the system. You can close the CD, open the CD, show taskbar, hide taskbar. Essentially, it's low-level access. So you can do anything essentially to the system, and that's that. And there's a command and control component. So again, monitoring these network connections, controlling not just ingress traffic into the network, but also controlling egress traffic from the network should help you identify some of this command and control traffic. If you disrupt or stop command and control traffic, in most cases, you stop the attacker. There are ways that you could build into the software that once you stop command and control traffic, that it will detonate something else, but that's fairly rare because they're trying to make money. So anyway, Borat rat, interesting. Take a look at it if you're into those things. Well, that's all I've got for this episode of the Unsecurity podcast. Again, it's just me, so hopefully you made it through this monotone voice. You learned a few things. You can take a few things back and work on them yourself. At the end of the day, we're here to serve. We're trying to help people protect themselves at home. I'll give you a shout out to just all the great people I get to work with every week. It's truly amazing, and a number of names come to mind. I'm not going to call any one of them out, but for those who know me and get a chance to work with me and are listening, shout out to you. You make this worthwhile for me in a lot of different ways, and I appreciate it. So next week we'll have Brad back, and we'll catch you on episode 171. Have a good one.